it's an RNA virus, and the cells bind to a receptor called the ACE2 receptor. It's an angiotensin converting enzyme receptor, and this is most widely it's present at a high percentage in the lungs, but it is also present in heart, kidney, and in olfactory endothelium that is responsible for the smell in the nose, and in the blood vessels, and also in the intestines. So when we look at the second wave, we are seeing a lot of non-respiratory symptoms also. So somebody might have diarrhea and little fatigue without any breathlessness or cough, and still that can be COVID. So, but usually 90% of the people will present with lung symptoms, but it can also present with all the other symptoms as well. So, is virus is not actually killing the person. So, what is actually killing is the immune response to the virus is going beyond the limit. So, this hyperimmune response is what, when it crosses a particular limit, then it starts affecting our own body, different organs, and that's causing death. So when the treatment and the monitoring and what we're doing in the hospital is all centered around the clinical and biochemical inflammatory uh, changes which is happening in the body, not exactly the viral replication or viral increased viral load. So fighting the inflammation at the right time and using the right drug at the right time is very important. And this has not this has become a major concern because people are not able to find doctors. They're taking drugs by themselves, and they're not coming to the hospital at the right time. So all these reasons are the one of the factors which is causing high mortality and high death rate in the second wave. So immunity can present will be different in different populations. It can vary based on the age, the ethnicity, the occupation, the environmental factors, and it's a very variable disease. In my house, all of us were affected with COVID. So I was not all of us were symptomatic also. So I was not admitted to the hospital, and I did not take any medication also. I definitely don't recommend you to do that. But because I am a doctor and I was closely monitoring myself, and on day-to-day basis I closely monitor myself, so that's the reason I experimented. But for my parents, we admitted them on day 7, day 8. Saw the symptoms. So it's really a very variable disease. There is no single protocol for every person in this disease. And like I said, the dysregulated or the disturbed immune response is what is causing the severe disease. So who are the people who, so this quote will, defense is how far you can go without destroying from within what you are trying to defend from without. So this is the problem we are facing now. So how do you strengthen yourself from within to protect yourself? Is to put it in simple word, I mean, to simplify the whole immune resilience concept, we need to do three things. So we need to balance the inflammatory pathways which are disturbed. We need to reduce the oxidative stress and increase the antioxidants. And 80% of the immune cells reside in your blood vessels in the intestines. So that is where that's the like the most important part of the immune system. So we need to really strengthen our intestines and the gut. So any GI problems, it's better you resolve. And improving your gut microbiome also improves your immune cells. So these words might seem complicated, but it's to achieve this, it's all in your hand, and you only have to do 5 things. So they are food and nutrition, optimizing your sleep, exercise, stress reduction, and social factors. So when I say food and nutrition, it's not the conventional calorie counting and just looking at protein intake and vitamin mineral. So to really look at food as medicine, you need to look at something beyond just the macro and micronutrients we know, which are phytonutrients. And phytonutrients are basically plant derived nutrients which are specific to plants, and different plants have different phytonutrients, and all of them are responsible and required for our various enzyme reactions in the body. So it's not a single, just eating cucumber, carrot for your salad in your plate will not be enough. There has to be variety of plants in your diet, and it has to be nutrient dense. So what is recommended is about at least about 6 to 9 servings, uh, small cups of vegetable per day. So this is equal to rice and wheat. The amount of grains you eat, you need to eat the equal amount of vegetables. So half your plate, it's better to have palya and vegetable filled sambar and raw salads in your plate, and then the remaining half can have dal and rice and chapatis. So this is the amount of nutrition you need to really balance the immune system. And fiber content is important because it is not just for the easy movement of your bowel, but it's also the fuel for the bacteria in your gut. So the bacteria in the gut is influences the immune cells in your gut, and that influences the immune system of your entire body. So that is why fiber is so important. And also we need to incorporate fermented vegetables and probiotic foods like curd and buttermilk, and uh, even paneer also is fermented, and idli is also fermented. So these fermented foods will improve the probiotic in the gut. So it's not enough if you just add all this. You have to remove what is offending your immune system. So extra salt and extra sugar has to be reduced. All kinds of high glycemic food like processed food, chocolates, bakery products, ice creams, all that has to be reduced, and trans fat has to be reduced. So one general thinking is, if I'm eating at home, it's healthy no matter what I eat at home. That is also wrong. So it's not enough if you just eat at home. It is how you cook and how what you eat. So if you're getting all kinds of ready to eat packet stuff home, again, it doesn't make sense. It'll again have trans fat. If you're reusing your vegetable oil again, then it becomes trans fat. If you're having a lot of fried food in the vegetable oil, again, it becomes trans fat. So the way you cook and the way you eat also matters a lot. Not just eating at home is not enough. And alcohol and smoking definitely will influence your immune system. So the next important thing is sleep. So sleep may seem very simple, but it's the one of the most important areas. If you there are studies which shows that there are certain cells called natural killer cells. That is the uh, first line of defense which comes in place when you have a bacterial or a viral attack. So when you skip one days of sleep, the natural killer cells can come down by almost 70 to 80%. So that is the amount of effect it can have to sleep. And it's proven when in night shift workers, in doctors and sisters and all who always do night shift, they are prone to more infections, sinusitis, sore throats, and various other immune compromised problems. So it's especially important for you guys because you are exposed to blue light constantly, and this reduces the melatonin. So you have to set your circadian rhythm right. Um, there are various ways where you can decrease the blue light exposure. You can install uh, Flux app on your desktops, and nowadays Android and iPhones have automatic mode where you go to night mode. And also in your room, you have to get rid of white light after 6 p.m. So all these blue light exposure really hampers your melatonin, and especially for you guys spend time at night in front of the computer, that hampers your sleep cycle. So uh, it's worthwhile making some extra effort to really optimize your sleep. And next thing about exercise is exercise can be a little tricky in today's situation because excessive exercise itself is a inflammatory problem. It's an inflammation. So if you have never exercised in your life, I wouldn't recommend you to go all out on exercise now. It's important for you to personalize the exercise according to your fitness level and gradually progress right now. So if you are affected by COVID and you're getting back, even that time, it's very important for you to very slowly get back to your exercise routine. But it is definitely important for you to have some kind of a physical activity. That's extremely important for your immune cells also. And Dr. Rupa will be talking in detail about reducing stress. But I would like to mention that I have come across a lot of people. There are patients who come who, because of panic attack, they just come to the hospital with saturation of 70, 80. And you just talk to them for 2 minutes and make them calm down, then saturation immediately goes to 90, and they will have normal CT scans, normal blood markers. So stress is extremely important at this particular time, especially when the media is really brainwashing you, and fear mongering has become extremely high now. I realized this in March 2020 itself. When the lockdown happened, within 5 days, I realized, and at home, we stopped watching news. So from March 2020 till now, we have never switched on the news. I recommend all of you to do that because there's absolutely nothing extra you get out of watching news channels. And if there's anything from the company, Shashi will send you a email, and your friends will always give you information if there's something very important. So there's absolutely nothing except fear mongering which is happening from the media. So Dr. Rupa will tell you in detail about stress. And social factor and connection is extremely important now. You have to find ways to, uh, there are studies which was done in the blue zone areas. The blue zone areas in the world are where people live beyond 100 years old. So the most common thing they found about people who live beyond 100 are they are socially connected. It was not following veganism or following some paleo kind of diet, or it was not anything related to, uh, of course, all of that is important, but beyond physical exercise and diet, social connected was a common factor in this group of people. So if you are feeling lonely, it's very important to find ways to at least virtually connect with your friends and family members, and that will really impact your um, immune cells also. So now, one problem with food is even if you're eating organic, it is you don't get enough nutrients because of the way we grow food. So our agricultural revolution definitely helped us get rid of famine and a lot of poverty, but it has also got us into a little bit of trouble in terms of nutrition. Unless you are growing food in regenerative agricultural methods, there is no way that your current food, what is available in the market, can meet all your needs, especially when we have been on a diet which is so nutrient deficient. Now suddenly you can't get everything in your diet. So supplements will definitely help you to reach that optimal level of nutrition. Vitamin C is something you already know. It's all it's there's no doubt about its efficacy in improving the immune system. It's used daily, and you can also use it as a prophylaxis. That is, even if you're not affected, even if you don't have symptoms, you can still take a vitamin C. uh, it's there in all green leafy vegetables, citrus fruits, and nuts. But the amount of vitamin C really required to affect your immune system is beyond 1 gram per day. So that amount of vitamin C is a little difficult to get. So uh, one problem with the vitamin C, which you generally get easily in the pharmacies, are the quality and the bioavailability is low. So you might get vitamin C for 5 rupees or 2 rupees, which when if you take 2 or 3 tablets, you will get diarrhea. So better vitamin C would be something called a natural vitamin C, where you can tolerate up to 1 gram. So if you are affected by COVID, that kind of a vitamin C high quality supplement is preferred the over the counter regular vitamin C you're seeing now. Vitamin D is unbelievably important in your immune cells. 80% of Indians were vitamin deficient before the COVID era. So when you had a normal activity, and it's more relevant and more prevalent in software engineers, where you sit inside the office entire day. So it's very important for you to expose yourself to sunlight. And it is also important, when you expose yourself to sunlight, it sets your circadian rhythm. So every day, even if you can't watch the sunrise every day, at least make it a habit to spend 4 to 6 p.m. in your balconies or in the terrace. So this what is not only beneficial for your vitamin D production, but also it sets a circadian rhythm, and the sunset which happens, the blue light gradually changes to orange and red and dark. That will start producing your melatonin, and it improves your sleep also. So vitamin D, even if you don't know your levels of vitamin D, up to 5,000 international units is all right to take. But what is easily available in the pharmacies are a much higher concentrations, like 60,000 international units. Those can cause a problem if you take overdose of that. So something between 1,000 international units and 5,000 international units will not cause any toxic level or any side effects, even if you take it every day. So vitamin A is something which you don't see in the media, because it is uh, slightly expensive to supplement, and also it is expensive to test if you're vitamin A deficient. And it's relatively a little easier to get vitamin A by dietary supplement. So if you can radically improve your vegetable intake, that should take care. but you can make sure that your multivitamin tablet has good amount of vitamin A. And the strength of evidence in COVID when vitamin A is actually strong, it is the evidence is stronger than vitamin C and D. Zinc is also something which or which you all know and you're taking. Selenium is an important mineral which is also helpful for your immune cells. So this can be found in most of the nuts. So having a handful of nuts soaked for 12 hours every day will help you get enough of minerals. So EGCG is an active component in green tea. It is a phytonutrient, polyphenol, which which is important in there is a study which shows that it can has specific action against COVID also, but the evidence is not great. But definitely, there's no side effects also, and it's something better than coffee or tea. So you can have up to 4 cups of green tea without any problem or any side effects. Honey is something which we know in Indian tradition, which is stressed upon. It reduces the inflammation of the mucosa in your throat and nose, and which is part of the kashayas which your grandparents or your mother makes. Garlic can be increased in your cooking. That also has some amount of anti-inflammatory action. Turmeric is beyond doubt very good anti-inflammatory drug. It has enough clinical evidence, but evidence specific to COVID is not there. But it's always a good anti-inflammatory drug. So increasing the use of turmeric in your cooking can definitely help. But it's also very important to make sure you know where you're getting the turmeric from. If organically grown turmeric, high quality turmeric is what you should be looking at, because turmeric also has a lot of lead contamination, because when they make it for cheap turmeric used for puja or for decorations, that has a lot of lead toxicity. So using that kind of turmeric in your cooking and you can land up in lead toxicity. And probiotic, sometimes if you have gut problem, it's definitely worth taking a supplement, because like I said, 80% of your immune cells live in your enteric circulation in the lymphatics of your gut. So it's very important to make sure that your intestines are at the optimal health. So nowadays another problem is when you get sore throat or when you get dry cough, you tend to over panic and think in terms of COVID. If it's not associated with fever or fatigue, you can still stay at home, take your grandmother's recipe of salt water gargling and kashayam made of turmeric, pepper, and coriander and honey. But these kind of homemade remedies are not something which you should be having every day. I don't deny that our Indian herbs, our Indian medicine is very rich in anti-inflammatory components, but it is a medicine. It is not a supplement which you should take every day. So I've asked multiple Ayurvedic doctors if the very easily people have kashaya every day, and do they recommend it like every day? So they definitely say that they have to look at the components of kashaya before having it every day. So what it can do is it can cause gastritis. It can become a blood thinner. We've had patients who have been taking kashaya every day and come to hospital with bleeding, uncontrolled bleeding. So you have to be very careful in choosing what kind of kashaya you take every day, which has minimal ingredients like turmeric, coriander, pepper, ginger, that should not be a problem. But when it gets more complicated with a lot of herbs, lot of botanicals, then you have to consult an Ayurvedic doctor before taking something every day. And same with nasal congestion. You don't have to get scared immediately unless it's associated with fever and fatigue. You can still, for a simple nasal congestion, you can take some essential oil inhalation, steam inhalation, and some xylitol sprays. Okay, now moving to having COVID infection, or what exactly happens when you have COVID. So it's important to understand the stages of COVID infection. So the active viral replication usually stops in a normal individual in 9 to 10 days. And after that, whatever problem you're having is because of your immune response or hyperimmune response. And that causes organ damage, and it can lead to multi-organ dysfunction and then death. So when you're exposed to the infection, the virus, till about 5 days, you can be asymptomatic. And before developing symptoms, there is a mild chance that you can transmit the infection. Once you develop symptoms, uh, that from up to 9 days, you can have viral replication. After 9 days, it's all immune response. So after, when you go beyond moderate to severe, then it's very difficult even in hospitals to treat the infection. So if you go to the recovery phase, then you don't need a hospital admission. I'll go more detailed about it. So it is very important to catch the infection when it is going from immune inflammation to hyperinflammation. This is where cytokine storm happens. So it's like a building catching a fire. When you catch the fire at ignition, it is possible to control the disease. If it crosses this, then it's very difficult to control. So how do you know that it's crossing from the immune inflammation to hyperinflammation? So these are the tests we do: blood test, which is CRP, D-dimer, and neutrophil and lymphocyte ratio. So when you have symptoms, mild symptoms, then the normal drugs which are given are paracetamol to control fever. Ivermectin, doxycycline has a mild viral action. Zinc and vitamin C is also given. And then you do these clinical tests. So it's important when you do the test also. As soon as you develop symptom, if you do, there is a chance that you may not really understand the potential of your disease. So between third and fifth day is ideal to do these investigations to check if you are going from immune to hyperinflammation. So if you're going towards hyperinflammation, then we start on a steroid based on your blood investigation. So what is happening now is, because the hospitals are full, private hospitals are expensive, government doctors are not available. People are, if one person is affected with COVID, the same prescription is being circulated to all their friends and family members. And the pharmacies also have started making the COVID kit. So if your COVID kit contains these, what is below here, paracetamol, ivermectin, doxycycline, then you're okay to take it in mild symptoms. But if you have dexamethasone, which is a steroid, and you're taking it during, still when your body is trying to fight it, then you are actually suppressing your body and not giving your body an opportunity to fight it. So these are the people, and also the viral replication may still be active. And when you viral replication is active and you take dexamethasone, then you are not giving your an opportunity for your body to fight it. And those are the people who are going bad. And recently you've heard about the black fungus, mucormycosis, and so mucormycosis is also happening for people who are being treated with dexamethasone for a long time. So this steroid is something which we doctors should start, and it has to be tapered as soon as your symptoms start coming down. So when you get steroid in a COVID kit without a prescription for 3 weeks, then that is where you are really hampering your immune system. So and also one more problem is we are only looking at decreased saturation. So this is actually a late sign what happens. So first your inflammation, hyperinflammation happens, then your lungs start getting damaged, then your partial pressure of oxygen start decreasing, then your saturation of your oxygen in the peripheral bloodstream will start decreasing. What we are checking is only this. But where we need to start acting is when the inflammation markers start rising. So you have to know when to stay at home, when to go to the hospital, and when to get admitted. So mild disease is where you can still stay at home with teleconsultation. So what is mild is you just have upper respiratory tract symptoms like mild cough, mild cold, sore throat. You don't have shortness of breath or hypoxia. That is something you have to remember. You can have a little fever and fatigue in mild disease, and your saturation has to be 94% at room air. So what is happening now is youngsters, our aged people have good lung compliance. So they have something called as happy hypoxia. So unless your lungs are damaged to about 50-60%, you will not show a drop in saturation. So that's why youngsters who come with severe disease are also dying now. So one way to test this is you check your saturation, then walk for 6 minutes. And after 6 minutes, again check your saturation. If it falls by 5%, then you have to consult a doctor. But either ways, home isolation has to be under doctor supervision. Don't listen to people who have experienced COVID before or who just send you some Google articles about it. So what is important, it's also important for you to understand why we do blood investigation and why the COVID blood investigations are so expensive. This is also one problem people are concerned. I've always had cough and fever. I've never spent so much on blood investigation for cough and fever. Why are you charging so much? So this is because we need to do these investigations. Complete blood count will check all your WBC and platelet level. These three investigations, C-reactive protein, ferritin, and LDH, will show how much of inflammation is happening in your body. And this inflammation, and I also told you this endothelial cells also are affected in COVID. That is, endothelial cells are inside the blood vessels. So it is a thromboembolic disorder. That means there can be blood clots can happen in COVID. When you see patients suddenly dying, that is probably because of thromboembolism. That is a clot getting dislodged in the heart, blocking the heart, or clot getting dislodged and going to the brain and blocking the brain. So to check if there is any clotting happening in your body, we need to do these tests. This D-dimer and fibrogen levels were all tests which we were doing in ICU patients who were very sick before. But now today we are doing it to all COVID patients. So that is because we need to really understand COVID before treating it. And we also have to know your liver and kidney function test before treating, because some drugs like remdesivir can have an impact on your liver. So proning is something which you all have come across. It is something which improves your lung compliance when you're in a single position, like sitting or sleeping in a single position. If you're sleeping straight, then only your front aspect of your lung is used for breathing. So the back aspect, the dorsal aspect of your lung remains a little unused. So when you keep changing your positions, you're making sure all aspects of your lung are being used, and there is no atelectasis of your lungs. So if you are in mild disease, you have to stay home isolated for 10 days. And when you don't have, after 10 days from the first onset of your symptom, and if you don't have fever for 3 days continuously, that is when you can say that you are cured of the disease, of the acute disease, acute phase. So now you don't have to do an RT-PCR test to say that you can be discharged, or to say that you can meet other people, or at least your house members. Like I said, after 9 to 10 days, the viral replication would have stopped. So if to be extra careful, you can stay isolated for 2 weeks to about 20 days. So beyond that, there is no use of staying isolated if you are asymptomatic. Isolated, I mean isolated from your home members also. Okay, what is moderate disease? Moderate disease is when your respiratory rate is beyond 24, or your saturation level at room air without any oxygen is less than 94. So this is when, based on all the blood test, it's better you get admitted to a hospital, or at least you are under constant doctor supervision, because we will start you on a steroid, which is an anti-inflammatory drug, and we'll also start you on an anticoagulation to prevent thrombosis from happening. And viral, its disease itself is not, that's not the only problem in corona. Another problem is when your immunity is all dysregulated and it's confused, there can be a bacterial infection in your lung also, because of all the damage the lung is going on. So that can cause a bacterial pneumonia. So we might add you on an additional antibiotic because of a secondary infection. So a severe disease is when your respiratory rate, your breathing rate per minute is beyond 30, and you're not able to maintain saturation above 90 at room air. So this is when you have to get admitted in a center where there is ICU support, or there is mechanical ventilation support, where a machine will support your lungs to breathe. A regular oxygen cylinder will only give you oxygen, but this machine will also modulate the pressure at which you're receiving the oxygen. So it becomes your lungs, it's easier for it to breathe. And we'll continue to add steroids and anti-inflammatory agent, and we'll also treat you with anticoagulation. And immunomodulators are still something which doesn't have great evidence. It has to be decided based on specific people, based on their disease, and also some blood tests have to be done. So what about children? When do you keep your children at home? If your child has only fever, cough, running nose, loose stools, vomiting, a little bit of body pain and redness of eyes and little rashes, all these can be COVID symptoms. If you can take a doctor's consultation and still watch at home. So you can, regular paracetamol will be sufficient in children. They usually don't have, little more robust because they are constantly given vaccines up to 5 years of age, and their innate immunity is also more responsive. So usually, most of the children get relieved after the mild symptoms. But in the second wave, and also what was happening in first wave is children were the spreaders, because in first wave children never used to get infected. They would just be asymptomatic, carry the infection home and spread it to everybody at home. But in second wave we are seeing children also being symptomatic, but uh, they are getting relieved of mild symptoms. But if the trend continues, and if there is a third wave again, there is a chance for children to be the highest affected population. So when do you admit a child? So if your child has a fever of more than 102, or the breathing of the child is rapid, then you need to admit the child. When are you, when is what are the alarming symptoms you which you have to make sure you rush to the hospital and admit, is when there is indrawing of chest, when the child looks pale or they're a little bluish color, and the child's arms and feet feel cold, the eyeballs look sunken and the child is looking weak, and child is not passing urine as frequently as before, child is not eating, and the child is drowsy or lethargic. These symptoms should prompt you to definitely admit the child to the hospital. Now, coming to vaccine. So there is a hypothetical philosophy that it's called Buridan's ass philosophy. So when you put a rational ass, which is extremely hungry and thirsty, at an equidistance from water and hay, then the rational ass will continuously be confused whether to go to the water or to the hay, and the rational ass may die of hunger and thirst. So that is the similar situation we are in now. So when it comes to vaccine decision, we should probably shut our rational mind and take what we get, because uh, it definitely stimulates your immune system to be. See, I'm not saying vaccinated people will never get COVID. Definitely we have seen vaccinated people getting COVID, but your body is a little more prepared to handle COVID. So the amount of people getting into ICU or going to severe disease will be lesser if you're vaccinated. At the same time, because of our Indian population, the vaccine centers, if it's overpopulated, may become a place where you get infected. So you have to make sure that you're very well protected when you go to a vaccine center, and you make sure you book your appointment and then go, and it's not crowded. There are situations where people have contracted virus in the vaccine center and they've died. So just because you have got vaccine today and your first dose, you're not uh, immune. You have to finish your second dose, and you have to go beyond third or fourth week to get enough immune cells to fight against the disease. So it's very important to understand and not become overconfident just after the first dose. So what it is in our hand, and what we can really do is we can get prepared for vaccine. Prepare by really optimizing our immunity and making sure that when we get a vaccine, we get enough immune cells and we get enough uh, benefit out of the vaccine. So before you get vaccinated, you make sure you don't have an active infection. You stop smoking at least for 2 weeks. If you stop smoking forever, that will definitely help you, but at least for 2 weeks, you have to stop smoking. And you optimize your microbiome by getting enough fiber in your diet. 4 days before the vaccine and 4 days after the vaccine, you make sure your sleep is at the highest quality. And make sure you have a little bit of fitness and you're active so that your circulation is good and your body is functioning well. And you have to make sure you don't have any nutritional deficiencies for your immune system to work with. Absolutely be stress free during vaccine and after vaccination. And if you are on any pharmaceutical drug, then definitely you'll have to take a doctor consultation before going to the vaccine, especially if you are on any immune suppressing drugs like steroids or immune modulators, or if you are having any treatment for cancer, then it's better to consult before you get vaccinated. Thank you. I have not addressed all the questions you have sent. I will address some of the questions at the end of the session after Dr. Rupa's session.
Yes, Dr. Gaurang, the session was really, really informative.